Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a big day of our show for you. Today, we're going to take you around the world of college football, reviewing a wild week one with lots of crazy performances, last minute wins, and a couple of major upsets as well. Then we'll take a look at my top 25 for this week. Usually the AP top 25 comes out on Sunday. This week it comes out on Tuesday because they have a game tonight between Florida State and but Florida State plays tonight. So they wait until Tuesday for this week only. Florida State takes on Boston College tonight. Then we're going to go over our very first NFL power rankings. We're going to do that every single Monday throughout the season. Today, we're going to give you our first list 32-1. But before we get into college football, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for taking the time on a beautiful Labor Day to talk some sports with me. But like I was saying, we are going to get a little bit into a review of college football from this weekend. And we're going to start with the number one team in the nation. Georgia continued to be Georgia. They proved why they were the number one team in the nation heading into this week, curb stomping Clemson, absolutely destroying them. It looked like it was going to be a tight game through the first half. It was 6-0 Georgia after the first two quarters were in the books there. The defense for both teams were playing out of their minds. But then Georgia in the locker room figured it out. They scored 14 points in each of the next two quarters, ending up winning by a total score of 34-3, outscoring them 28-3 in the second half. It was just a masterclass, especially defensively for Kirby Smart's Georgia Bulldogs. They went out there and they proved against a team in Clemson that was supposed to be much improved this year. You know, they had a lot of returners. They don't use the transfer portal, which is going to get Dabo Swinney into a lot of trouble that he might already find himself in. Dabo Swinney has taken kind of a moral stance, I guess, against the transfer portal, a way where you take a look at what he does, and it seems like if he could just use the transfer portal, this is a team that could be really good. We see teams like Louisville, which we'll get into later, teams like Florida State, teams like Boise State that get, a lot of great recruits through the portals. They turn their teams into top 25 programs or programs that are in playoff contention through this portal. Ole Miss, another one of these teams that relies on the portal a lot. Now, you don't need to be a Colorado, and you don't need to just rely solely on the portal, but Dabo Swinney needs to adapt. He needs to be able to use the portal as an option, as opposed to just getting taken from in the portal. It is a net loss every single season for Clemson, and we're starting to see that. And I think Dabo Swinney's on the hot seat now. Even though he won that championship, it's starting to run sour because he just refuses to adapt. And if you refuse to adapt, you're going to get left behind. And he needs to learn that. Clemson needs to learn that. And hopefully for Clemson, this game was a wake-up call for them because they're not going to win anything. They're not going to compete seriously for anything if they don't start using the transfer portal at least a little bit. At least get your toes wet in there. Use it as an option. Don't just shut it out entirely. Outside of Georgia, there were a couple other top 25 matchups that I want to take a look at. First one that took place was between Notre Dame and Texas A&M. And this one took place on Saturday. This one was very low scoring. The defenses for both of these teams really stepped up. Notre Dame's defense was awesome. They made Texas A&M's quarterback look awful. Carter Wegman was supposed to be a solid quarterback for A&M, but we always feel like A&M has this hype, right? A&M always comes in with all of these resources. They had a really good defensive line, and I want to give the defense their flowers because the defense played really good, holding Riley Leonard to 158 yards passing. They only ended up giving up 18 first downs. It's just the turnover battle really hurts here. They end up losing 23-13 in a game where it really could have gone either way. This was a game that we saw Notre Dame really pull ahead at the end in the fourth quarter specifically. They were tied at halftime. They were only down 7 heading into the fourth, and then all of a sudden at the end of that fourth quarter they give up 10 straight unanswered points. 10 straight points with under 2 minutes to go, putting this game away. A&M just needs to figure out how to close. They need to get some better quarterback play. Their defense is solid. Notre Dame looked really good, though. I was a lot lower on Notre Dame, and their defense especially came out and impressed me. Need to see a little more out of an offense, but they got it. They drew a tough matchup, and good on them for winning. And the other game, the exciting USC versus LSU matchup that took place last night, the Sunday nightcap between USC and LSU, 23-13. USC, led by Miller Moss, took this game at the last second, scoring a touchdown with 8 seconds to go in the game on a 13-yard run. They were just trying to set up for a game-winning field goal at that point. Go ahead and score. End the game on as close to a walk-off touchdown as just about as close to a walk-off touchdown as you can possibly get. Both of these offenses looked really good. I was very, very impressed with Miller Moss. When you take a look at what he did last night, compare it, both of these teams went through a lot of changes. And outside of the quarterbacks, Newsmeyer and Miller Moss both put up really good performances, continuing from their really good bowl performances last year. But the defenses for both of these teams, I was impressed with. Now, they both gave up over 400 yards, but these are both super high-powered offenses. The fact that they both were able to keep each other under 30 points is extremely impressive. These two teams have a lot to look forward to this season. USC, their defense made drastic improvements. They weren't kidding when they said they were going to change their philosophy and actually play defense this season. Now, obviously, we all saw Brian Kelly's reactions through hitting a table, getting all angry about this game. This is a tough opponent. USC is a very, very good team. They're a team that, again, Lincoln Riley is there. He's always going to produce QB talent. Miller Moss is no different. Miller Moss has quietly been waiting his turn in the wings for USC for 2-3 years at this point. He finally gets his chance, and he shows up, shows out. He looks like one of the best quarterbacks all week. Outside of those matchups, there was a couple more that I wanted to touch on. First of all, Miami absolutely trounces Florida, a game that people thought would be close. It had a 2.5-point spread. Miami makes Florida look awful, and there was locker room. The stuff in the locker room after that Florida game does not look good for Billy Napier and that team. He was already on the hot seat. Florida has one of, if not the most brutal schedules in the entire country, especially down the stretch. And they just get absolutely dogged on their own home field against a in-state rival in Miami. And Miami was trying to steal their recruits too. Cam Ward looked awesome. He didn't look like anything could faze him in that game, in a tough environment, one of the toughest to play in all of college football. He looked really, really good. So did the entirety of Miami. That defense stepped up. They didn't let Florida really get anything done at all. As well as, of course, the offense putting up 41 points on a Florida team that, well, they weren't super stacked on offense or defense. They were still supposed to be better. This was supposed to be a close game. Miami looks like a real title contender in week 1. They played one of the tougher opponents. We'll talk about how much that moved them up in the rankings from 19, at least in my personal rankings, when we get into that in the next segment. But before we end out on this, there were 2 players that I wanted to highlight, and I couldn't go over a week 1 review without talking about them. The first one is wide receiver T-Mac from Arizona. He puts up a crazy stat line. Not a normal stat line, Madden numbers, college football 25 numbers. He puts up, hold on. He puts up 4 touchdowns, 3 of them in the first half. It's just insane what he does. He's 6'5", 240, incredibly physical. There's just nothing you can do to stop him. 10 catches, 304 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's 30 yards per reception. He's in Heisman conversation here. Noah Fifita looked really good, especially in that second half after starting off a little bit slow, letting New Mexico stay in the game. And then we had a 6-touchdown performance from Mr. Gentry of Boise State against another team that really went hard in the transfer portal in Georgia Southern, right? These were two teams that kept going back and forth. Boise State ends up pulling it out in a tight one. They win by 12, but it was very tight down the stretch. Gentry finishes with 6 touchdowns, all on the ground. Incredible performances out of these two. I'm excited to see what they can do for the rest of the season. There's a lot of season, though, to keep up on, and we'll break down a lot more than just those games. We'll talk about a whole bunch of teams. Again, it's week 1. They scheduled a lot of FCS opponents. We'll talk about a top 25. I put together a top 25 for you this week. We're going to go over everything that happened and why I have them ranked where they are. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.